the Chicago Bears and the Tennessee Titans. The Titans looking to bounce back. A.J. Brown looking to bounce back. Now, he saved your day with a touchdown last week, I know, but this is somebody who's entered territory that you are hoping for, you are expecting for him to be a low-end wide receiver one each week of the season. And the great thing about the Titans is that they already have their bye week. So you're able to ride these guys right now to get you through some of these spot starts that you find yourself in. That also includes Corey Davis. Now, A.J. Brown, we have at wide receiver 16 this week. Corey Davis, we have at wide receiver 21. You can play both of them as wide receiver twos. Now, I don't love the matchup because it's the Chicago Bears, and this defense is legit. They've been playing very, very well, but the Titans have to lean on guys like Brown and Corey Davis. Now, we're still waiting to see if Humphries is going to clear the concussion protocol this week. That's something we'll keep you updated on if you're following us on Twitter at BellyUpMDFF Show. And, of course, if he doesn't play, then that's extra targets for Corey Davis, extra targets for A.J. Brown. I think they're going to have to lean on their perimeter wide receivers because Chicago is very good against the run. They're also very good against tight ends. And I talked about this with Jonnu Smith, which will bring up that interesting point now. Jonnu Smith does come in at tight end 12 for us. I'm not ready to bail on him yet. He's been very frustrating the past couple of weeks, other than the game against Cincinnati last week, which there was really no excuse for. The 2 weeks prior to that, there was an injury, and it was the Pittsburgh Steelers. So you kind of understand, and from that standpoint, I kind of look at it like, all right, you had one bad week in a matchup where you should have done well. You're somebody who has tremendous talent. You're on an offense that typically likes to utilize a tight end. The concerns are that Jonnu Smith hasn't been running as many routes. He's been asked really to predominantly block pretty much this entire last month. That is because Taylor Lewan's been out, that offensive line's been banged up, and they need somebody to help out the running game. They need somebody to help out Derrick Henry because that's still the focus of the offense at the end of the day. That is concerning if that continues to be the case, because now he'll become somebody that you have to score a touchdown because you're not seeing the 5 to 7 targets that you were early on in the season. I talked about this on the recap shows earlier on in the week. If Jonnu Smith is not able to at least get back to his opportunity share this week, especially if Adam Humphries does not play, while it's not a great matchup against Chicago, then he is somebody that you're going to have to go ahead and just move on from. He's going to be somebody that we welcome to Flushtown. Unfortunately, we don't want to see it happen because he's a hell of a talent. And right now, having talent at the tight end position is very important. But if he can't do it against Chicago, that's a month long of him being somebody you couldn't play or killed your lineup. He's going to have to fall back into the streaming territory based on the matchup that he's on, and have to prove that he can get back to his opportunity share. So this is the last week we have Jonnu Smith as a tight end 12. If he doesn't wind up doing it this week, then he's somebody who's going to fall back and be a matchup-dependent streamer. So we're going to be having all eyes on Jonnu Smith quite potentially. Derrick Henry, RB2 in the week. I know it's against Chicago. I know it's tough. It hasn't mattered. He's looked good against Pittsburgh. He's run against tough defenses all year. This shouldn't be any different. And I'll reiterate this one more time. We've talked about this past couple of weeks. The great thing about Derrick Henry is that no matter what the game script is, even if the Tennessee Titans are down multiple scores heading into the second half, they will not abandon the run. Derrick Henry will get his 20 carries almost no matter what. Almost no matter what. So Derrick Henry, good to go. Fire him up. We love him a lot this week. Obviously, RB2. Don't worry about the matchup against Chicago if it was something you were even worried about in the first place. Ryan Tannehill comes in at QB 14. He's always going to be hovering around that QB 12 range, no matter what the matchup is, because this is somebody who has good weapons, first and foremost, fits really well in the Tennessee offense, and frankly has made himself an above-average quarterback in the NFL, a top 12 quarterback, and I'm not talking from a fantasy football standpoint, a top 12 quarterback in the NFL from just a playing talent standpoint, period. He's turned himself into that. That is what he is. That will continue. He still has great touchdown scores with or without, playing against a great matchup in Chicago. So we're good there. We expect him to do well. If you have Ryan Tannehill, you're not going to bench him to bring in a streamer who maybe has more upside this week. For instance, we have Drew Lock ranked at 12 with Ryan Tannehill ranked at 14. I'm not dropping Ryan Tannehill to pick up a Drew Lock. That's just not going to happen. So don't make crazy changes based on expected rankings heading into this week. Is pretty much my overall advice there. We go into Chicago, and David Montgomery comes in RB17. Continue to play him as an RB2. Maybe you want to look away. Maybe you want to watch a different game. Every time Chicago has the ball, I want to watch something else myself, because watching them on offense is horrible, is petrifying, is just demeaning, I think, the football. But David Montgomery, one way or another, is going to get you the targets. He's going to get you the volume. He's going to get you the opportunities you need to have a high floor. And if he ever scores one of these weeks, he's somebody who starts to knock on the door at RB12 territory with the volume that he's been getting in the passing game especially. So continue to fire him up. It's a good matchup against Tennessee, so maybe there's a little bit more upside than we normally have for David Montgomery heading into this game. The other big thing, of course, is Allen Robinson. Allen Robinson coming in here, he is going to be wide receiver 11 for us. So he's going to be a low-end wide receiver 1 in those 12-team leagues. We expect him to get high volume. He finally got back to it. It was, with Nick Foles early on, it was a little rough. Not early on. Early on, he was getting double-digit targets. A couple weeks after that, it all of a sudden seemed like the targets kind of knocked off. Nick Foles was playing even worse. The Chicago offense in general was playing even worse. But again, great matchup here. Tennessee's defense is not very good. Allen Robinson got back to his double-digit targets a week ago. We expect that to continue heading into this week. He'll be fine. He'll be good. He is going to be a low-end wide receiver 1 in this game with a high volume and a high floor. Jimmy Graham comes in at tight end 11 for us on the week. Tight end 11. He's the most targeted tight end in football right now. I mean, he is. As crazy as that sounds. And it's offering him opportunities. He hasn't always been able to execute. He hasn't always been able to take advantage. But it's offering him opportunities to give you a high floor. And he's getting targeted in the red zone, which is probably the most important part of that right now anyway. So he is somebody that we like quite a bit in this game. And you can play him as a top end streamer. Plain and simple. It's rough, but you can. Now, let's move on to our next game. Let's talk about Baltimore. Let's talk about the Colts. Now, Baltimore has a real interesting situation when it comes to the COVID issues right now. They had pretty much half their starting defense labeled as a high-risk contact players. Now, our expectation is that as long as these players test negative, because it was early enough on in the week, they will be able to get them all back for Sunday. But they're not going to be having practice actually on the field all week long. The team will, but not these defensive players, which is a lot of their key guys like Judon and so on and so forth. They might play on Sunday, but they're doing all virtual work. So it's going to make things a little bit interesting when it comes to this game. Now, on the offensive side of the ball, which is what we care about from a fantasy football standpoint, Lamar Jackson, for the first time all year, comes outside of our top 10 quarterbacks. The passing game hasn't been good. Now, Lamar hasn't been accurate, but this isn't all on Lamar. The play calling's been horrendous out of Greg Roman. Where's the motion? Where's the mismatches? Where are all the creative plays off of the read option that you were running last year? Where's all the easy looks for Lamar Jackson off of bootleg? Where's all the easy play actions? Why are every single one of your passing calls out of 3 tight end formations with really only 2 eligible wide receivers to throw the ball to? It's Marquise Brown deep, or it's Mark Andrews underneath. And if they're in the red zone, it's Marquise Brown on a fade or a slant, and Mark Andrews trying to get open in the back of the end zone. That's their entire passing attack. So while Lamar Jackson has not been good, while he has not been accurate, he has been done no favors by Greg Roman in the offensive play calling right now. None whatsoever. The rushing attack looked good against Pittsburgh, which is big. Now, I talked about this in the recap shows on, I believe it was Monday. A lot of people trying to come out and say, hey, you know what? The rushing attack looks better without Mark Ingram involved. False. The rushing attack looked better because they had 2 running backs in the rotation rather than trying to get 3 worked in. This is a big theme of mine, where especially when we're talking about certain teams like the Colts, like the Rams, and like the Baltimore Ravens. When you're trying to get 3 running backs involved, nobody gets a chance to get into rhythm. No one. Especially when you're the Baltimore Ravens, where your rushing attack, no matter who the 3 running backs are, is greatly based off of power rushing ability. That is your identity, your power rush game. Well, a power rush game gets better as the game goes on if you can get your guys in rhythm. Mark Ingram, Gus Edwards, J.K. Dobbins, you can't get these guys in rhythm when they're getting 10, 8, and 5 carries a game. It doesn't happen that way. You take one of them out, and all of a sudden they're both getting 15 carries a game. They get into rhythm. You start to build momentum. All of a sudden, this rushing attack, which we've been waiting for all year long because there's no reason why it should be stifled the way that it is, suddenly starts to look good. Suddenly starts to break off chunk plays, starts to gash the other defense. This was the Pittsburgh Steelers. Nobody besides Derrick Henry has even had a decent game against the Pittsburgh Steelers, let alone a good game. They had a good game out of 2 running backs. As long as Mark Ingram does not play this week, and that's not what we're not expecting him to. He didn't practice. It said he's dealing with more of a high ankle sprain. We think he's going to miss this week, maybe be a possibility for them in week 10. Well, then Dobbins and Gus Edwards will get the bulk of the work, and therefore they will be able to get in a rhythm. And even though the Colts on paper are a tough team to run against, especially when Darius Leonard is healthy, I am not worried about what they can give you as long as they're both getting about 15 touches in this game. I expect Dobbins to be a little bit more involved in the passing game this week. He only had 2 targets, I believe, last week. I think 5 or 6 targets are probably in his future. I think they're going to be looking to do a little bit more check down passing, a little bit more rhythm passing. After Marquise Brown came out with the tweet of he's frustrated with his role, Lamar Jackson is frustrated with the passing game in general. I think they're going to do some things to try to get them going again. So Dobbins comes in as our RB20 on the week. Gus Edwards are RB35. The thing about the Colts is that they get a lot of penetration up the middle. And the Ravens are banged up on the offensive line right now. So getting a push is going to be difficult for the Ravens in this game. So I think the Gus Edwards power game, bully ball, is not necessarily going to be as efficient this week as the J.K. Dobbins quickness off the edge style of running will be. I think Dobbins is going to have more success. So I have Dobbins at 20, Gus Edwards at 35. That also goes into, I think Dobbins is going to be a little bit more involved in the passing game. I mean, of the 2, he's the pass catching back, but I think there'll actually be pass catching work available for the running back position this week. So Dobbins is the low end RB2 as long as Mark Ingram does not play. And that's not our expectation as of this point. Marquise Brown comes in at wide receiver 19. Maybe the squeaky wheel will get the grease. This passing attack has to do something at some point. He's still the only wide receiver who gets most of the targets. He still has the big play capability. This Colts secondary is a secondary you can throw on, especially on the perimeter and especially on deep. They're a farce as far as their ranking goes against wide receivers. They haven't played anybody good this year. They have not played a top 10 offense this year, period. They haven't. So I think it's a little bit of a farce how good their defense is ranked right now, especially when it comes to the secondary. Mark Andrews comes in as a mid-level tight end. Now, again, you're not going to drop Mark Andrews. He can still be the number 1 pass catcher for this offense at any given moment, and he is the red zone threat. So you're not dropping Mark Andrews. You're not moving on from Mark Andrews, but this is a tough matchup because Darius Leonard and this Colts defense do an excellent job of taking away the tight end, kind of like the Pittsburgh Steelers do. And just given the inconsistencies of this pass offense in general this season, a low floor is going to have to be in your expectations possibly for the Baltimore Ravens. It's going to have to be there, unfortunately. Hopefully that does not happen, but it's going to have to be in that range as a possibility. So just keep that in mind. You're still playing Mark Andrews, though, if you have him, and I'm not giving him up for anything.